Welcome to XYPN Radio, where your host Alan Moore brings you into a community of fee-only financial planners who want to profitably and successfully serve Gen X and Gen Y clients. If you're ready to get the knowledge you need from leaders in your field, learn from forward-thinking advisors, and take action on your own goals, XYPN Radio is the show for you. Here's your host.
Hello and welcome to this episode of XYPN Radio. I am your host, Alan Moore, and today I'm really excited to have Dave Grant on the show. Dave is the founder of Retirement Matters, a fee-only RIA in Illinois. Now, you may be wondering why I said Retirement Matters, since Dave is fairly well known for having launched Finance for Teachers, a niche-focused RIA, back in 2013. Well, Dave dove into building a niche firm from the start, but ultimately didn't see a lot of success in that niche. He eventually hit a personal wall that he describes as just pure depression, which led him to pen an article for Financial Planning the magazine about his struggles. Dave said the outpouring of support was pretty overwhelming and eventually led him to make the decision to rebrand his firm to try and succeed with a little broader of a market focus. Dave has spent his entire career in financial planning, and I think his story will resonate with many young planners out there. He started out as an admin, moved to a paraplanner, and wanted to shift to being a lead planner, but he kept hitting career walls at the firms he worked in. His desire to work with teachers led him down the path of entrepreneurship and starting a firm to specialize in those clients. In this episode, Dave was extremely open and raw about his experience and some of the struggles of starting a firm. So if you're thinking about starting your own firm, you're going to want to listen to this entire episode. You can find any of the additional resources that we mentioned during the episode at xyplanningnetwork.com/84. In addition to the typical resources, you'll find a link to our recently launched book, co-authored by Kitsis and myself, titled The Monthly Retainer Model: What It Is, Why It Works, and How to Implement It in Your Firm. This month's podcasts are brought to you by one of our favorite sponsors and reigning swag champion of the 2016 XYPN conference, Robust Wealth. Robust Wealth is the unique, robo-enhanced, complete wealth management platform that provides advisors with all the tools they need to run, grow, and succeed, including a complete technology stack and portfolio management and rebalancing as a sub-advisor. Utilize Robust Wealth and their partners' institutional investment models or customize your own. Sign up for demo mode and test out their free technology stack at www.robustwealth.com. Robust Wealth, the complete wealth management platform. Climb on. Also be sure to go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to join our private group just for XYPN Radio listeners. You can interact with other listeners, ask us questions, and more. Hey, Dave, welcome to the show, man. Thanks so much for being on.
Thank you very much for having me.
I'm excited because you and I have known each other, I will say, since the beginning. I think you and I met the spring of my first job, which would have been 2011, which makes me feel very old, even though that was only 6 years ago now. Good gracious. So,
I've watched you through your journey of your whole financial planning career. It's been a wondrous thing to see.
The ADD resume of somebody who can't seem to keep a job. But I think XYPN is officially the longest term I've ever had a job in my life. So kudos to Kitsis for keeping us alive and going and keeping me engaged.
I actually said that in the car to my wife and father-in-law the other day. I'm like, do you know this is the longest job I've had? And my wife looked at me like, I've worked in my job 3 times longer than you have. You're not really getting any milestones.
You can't brag about that.
No.
Yeah, I've seen a lot lately about like, is job hopping good? Is it bad? And I get questions from advisors. Is it okay to change job every 2 to 3 years? And it's like, I don't know. It just depends on who you are. For those of we can always step back and say like, oh, you should keep your job for 5 or 10 years. But when you're in it, 2 years seems like forever. When you're in your 20s and 30s, like 2 years feels like you're giving up your whole career to work somewhere. So
it's true, yeah. And especially if you are at a company and you find you're not growing anymore, you have to jump. Like you've got to do it.
So let's take a step back. How did you? Well, first off, you obviously have the sexy British accent. So one, how did you end up on our side of the ocean, and sort of how did you get into financial planning initially? Sort of what was your initial career path?
It was a huge accident, the whole thing.
Crossing the ocean or getting into financial
planning? All of it. Yeah, the whole thing. Just a complete messy accident that turned out beautifully. So I was born and raised in England. I lived in London till I was 6. I then moved across the country to a town called Bristol. It's about 500,000 people. And lived there all the way through high school. So at the end of high school, pretty much the regular journey like it is here, you go into college, college in England is 3 years because you pick your major as soon as you get in the door. And I realized I don't have another 3 years left in me to actually keep going. So I actually took a year off. It's more and more popular in England. It's becoming more popular here, and it's kind of tokened as the gap year. And you essentially take 12 months and you can choose what you want to do. You can, do service projects, you can travel the world, you can work a job. I decided to split it in two and work for 6 months to save up so that I could then work abroad for 6 months and then travel as well using the money that I'd used while working in England. So there's a company in England and they pretty much said, give us the parameter of where you want to go and what type of work you want to do. So I said, I want to go to a country that speaks English because I'm lazy and I don't really want to be out of my comfort zone. And I want to work outside where it's warm. So they sent me to a really small town on the border of Illinois and Wisconsin called Fox Lake. And I worked at a YMCA camp for 6 months. So I was a pseudo camp counselor, outdoor education specialist. And immediately after that, I was like, I have to live here. But my visa came up and I went back to England and studied there, cut through a few years. I then came back to the same camp year after year being a camp counselor, was going to be a teacher in England, and then came over one final time. And I was on an 18-month visa at that point. My supervisor on the weekend of the first weekend I was there was this hot, blonde teacher who is now my wife of 10 years. So we pretty much did the whole, there's a movie called Green Card. We pretty much ripped off that movie in our whole journey. We dated for a year, got into that conversation of saying, we've got 6 months left of you being in the country. Do we get married? Do we break up and go home? And then we just looked at each other and said, we can't let this go. Like, this is nothing either of us has experienced before. Granted, we were 23. What do we know? So we either then decided, okay, do we do a shotgun wedding? Do we just totally just go off into the sunset? Or do we do this for real and plan a wedding in 6 months? I say we plan a wedding. It was all Sarah. She pretty much planned a whole wedding with her mom in 6 months. And I was like, I'll just show up. So 3 days after my visa expired, we got married. And that's kind of history in terms of me moving over the pond. Then I was armed with a psychology degree, which gives you minimal job possibilities anywhere in the world. And I, went into the human resource consulting and got fired after 6 months because I didn't enjoy it at all and was kind of lazy. And realized I didn't know what to do with our personal finances either. Sarah was a teacher. At that point, she wasn't earning much, and I had no concept of money growing up. So then I kind of looked online about how to learn about finances, and the CFP popped up and decided just to enroll in that class, even though it was pretty expensive being unemployed. And then realized I loved this. Like, can I do this for a job? Googled local financial planning companies. I took an interview with New York Life after listening to Dave Ramsey on the radio and sat in front of this guy. And he said, whole life's the best thing in the world. Like, you need to be selling this. And my response back to him was, I don't think Dave Ramsey would agree. The interview ended right there. He's like, all right, great. Good luck with your career. I'm like, oh, okay, thanks. But I found myself at a NAPFA firm. And it was a local firm in the Chicago suburbs. I interviewed pretty well because I was interviewing for a paraplanner position with no experience and 2 months into the CFP program. And they just looked at me like I was nuts. Like, why would we hire you? But their compliance officer said, you said in your interview you would do anything. So we're going to hire you as a junior paraplanner, which is a sexy word for a receptionist.
I would say paraplanner is usually called junior associate. So junior.
Yeah. So I know I was very happy for the role from being unemployed, but joined there and pretty much just jumped right in. Their paraplanner, who was their lead paraplanner, then left a month after I did. So I then inherited her whole caseload. And then worked there for 3 years, just learning the trade and, learning from some great people. It's a firm that 6 years after I left there, I really love the people still. And, still keep in contact and actually use a lot of their philosophies in the planning I do today. But there was a ceiling at that firm. They had 3 advisors. They pretty much weren't at capacity, so they needed to get all their advisors to capacity first before they could bring someone else on. So I then moved to another firm that was growing, and they said, you can be an advisor in the speed that you want to be in. So as long as you prove yourself here, you can be an advisor pretty quickly. So that firm was growing quickly. They had a rainmaker who was, very much tied into the oil industry. And so he was bringing clients in very quickly. Their AUM was growing about 25 to 30 million a year. So there was a lot of work to be done there. and a lot of opportunity. But unlike the first firm, it was more of a culture misfit when I decided I wanted to work with teachers. Having been married to a teacher, understanding our finances at that point, having lots of friends who were teachers, having a mother-in-law who was a teacher, wanting to be a teacher in England, that was in my blood. And I wanted to help people in Illinois after researching how complex it can be. It didn't really tie in too much to the ethos of the firm, and when I started going down that track, they were a little hesitant with me doing it. So it came to a point where they wanted me to go one way with my career and expertise and knowledge. I wanted to go another way, and I decided this isn't really going to be a fit for the long term, so why don't I just leave? And then it became a case of, do I find another firm? Like, I was job hopping, like we mentioned, every 3 years. Do I find another one that I could fit into, or do I kind of bite the bullet and start my own? That was 3.5 years ago, and that's when I started Finance for Teachers, which has now recently been rebranded to Retirement Matters.
So a couple of pieces there I want to be sure listeners hear from your story. One being that first firm you were with where there were great people that do great planning, but there was a ceiling. I sort of ran into this a little different, but sort of the same, I guess, core piece. And that is you may be with a great firm, a great company that ultimately just doesn't have enough opportunity for you to move up as quickly as you want. Sometimes you can be with the world's best firm and there's just not opportunity because if they've structured it in a way where they've got 3 lead advisors and 1 associate advisor, you've got to grow a lot to be able to need a new lead advisor. This is something I think that happens in a lot of smaller RIAs is they ultimately kind of cap out because they're too top heavy. They're too heavy on lead advisor, and it makes it almost impossible to move up. So just, I sort of experienced that in my first job with I'm not going to move up as quickly as I want. It's a great firm. And it's a tough decision to make. Somebody told me that I was getting out of a warm bed and stepping onto a cold floor when I left that first job. You probably felt the same way.
Yeah. So I would say there was a caveat there. The firm did go through a succession plan, about 2 years into me being there. So there was a slight shift in philosophy when the new owner came in. He wanted to be an advisor too. So it just added an extra layer on there. And then I flat out asked him, when am I going to be an advisor? I just passed the CFP exam and I'll be, CFP in a matter of months. And he said, you're probably going to have to wait another 3 years. And like we mentioned earlier, 3 years to a 20-something advisor, that's like an eternity. Like, I'm not going to wait that long.
And now, having run XYPN for almost 3 years now, in April we'll be 3 years old. If I were to say, you'll get this in 3 years, I think it's only 3 years. But I totally understand being on the other side of that. Have to wait 3 years. That's like half my career so far. Or, what do you mean I have to wait another 3 years? So there are many times where I think firm owners think 5 to 10 years is no big deal. But to a millennial, young Gen Xer, things just move faster for us. I don't know. And it doesn't mean you have to literally job hop every 2 years. But when you say 3 years, 3 years is a really long time. It is not it's just a couple years and you'll be fine. So,
well, even if you lay out even if you say it's going to be 2 to 3 years, don't just leave it at that. Put a game plan in place by saying in the first 6 months, we're going to train you on X. The next 6, it's Y. Then it's Z. And then we'll review everything. We'll be 2 years into that point. If you're great at everything, we'll accelerate it and you're done. You can't just say 2 years and sit where you are. That's not going to work at all.
There are so few firms that outline career paths and what it actually takes to go from, the typical career path, associate planner or paraplanner, and you move sort of that junior advisor role, and then you move to a lead advisor. There are skills and there's growth. I mean, there's a lot that determines that, right? And as a business owner, we should know this. You need to have certain communication skills. You need to have certain technical knowledge. You need to be able to prove yourself on these areas. If it involves business development, you need to show how you're going to do business development. But then also the business. Sometimes I think we talk too much about if you do A, B, and C, you can be a lead planner. So high-speed people, they knock out A, B, and C, and we're like, oh, we're not big enough. We don't have the revenue to support you moving up. And as an associate advisor, you don't think revenue of the firm, right? You don't think revenue till you're actually an owner. What do you mean you make $1 million a year? What do you mean we can't hire another $60,000 person? It's it's actually kind of a big deal.
Yeah. I mean, even if you say to someone, okay, in these 6 months, we're going to teach you on the softer skills of being an advisor, you're never going to master it in 6 months. A decade in, I still feel like I'm a baby in that field. Even if it's a 2-year plan, geez, you have so much to learn throughout your career. Even squeezing something in that 2-year window would be great if you can achieve something there.
Well, and people that have heard me rant about this before know, like, I am not a fan of the traditional career path just because I think it's silly that we hire lead advisor personalities and then make them be assistant paraplanners, because you meet people, and I meet, with students all the time, and I meet 21, 22-year-olds, and I think, like, you're going to be a lead planner. Like, you can just tell, right? And then I talk to other people and I think you're just not going to be, and that's okay. Like, that, there's not a good or bad. It's just, that's not your path. So I don't know. I've always thought it weird that we hire attorneys, but make them paralegals first. Whereas the legal field doesn't do that. Medicine doesn't make you a nurse and then, let you be a PA and then make you a doctor. They just let you be a doctor after school. So firm owners can email me and tell me why I'm so stupid for believing this. But moving on. So you decided, you ultimately went a little bit different direction, which I think many listeners and probably most of the members of the XY Planning Network will agree that you just sort of hit that crossroad where you just realize that the opportunity's not here. I know my story, and it sounds like yours as well, was just sort of looking at yourself and realizing, well, maybe I'm part of the problem because I can keep job hopping, but ultimately that may not end up being fulfilling. So, I guess what did it take for you to make the entrepreneurship leap? And you were married at the time, so you had to get your spouse on board. So I guess what was the process to actually make the decision for y'all to take the leap?
The decision took about 4 years, and that's the timeline that my wife likes to use. I use about 6 months in my head because Sarah's very hard to convince on something that she doesn't come up with. And it takes a lot of data. It takes a lot of information for her to process it, and it takes some time. So when I was looking to leave the first firm, I knew I wanted my own company. I knew that I wanted to do this by myself. I saw so many inefficiencies at the company I was working with that, if we implemented technology here, we'd be doing this in a day versus 2 weeks. And I had already designed my firm at that point. I didn't have the funding to do it. I think I was probably like 26, 27, freshly married for a couple of years, thinking about buying a house, having a kid. It just wasn't on the cards. So it was a case of, okay, I need to get more experience. I need to just be patient for a while and actually save up some money. But it was always in my head. And so probably about 2 years into working at the second firm, I then came to Sarah and said, I can't do this anymore. I have to leave. And we had, a discussion in the kitchen about it. And she was like, we don't have the money for it. B, I don't think it's the right time. And I threw out, the only way I'm going to stay at that company is if you're pregnant. Just being flippant. And she called me on it. She's like, I have a pregnancy kit right here. I'm going to go pee. And she came out. She was pregnant. All the things to call you on and all the life-changing implications that just came into our life as I'm making burgers with my hands. Yeah, that just rocked the boat. So that kind of delayed it for a little bit. But I told her, this is a fantastic moment for our family, but this still doesn't change what I'm going through. So we need to be deliberate about this. And, at that point, it became we have to start saving for this. We came up with a goal of how much we need in the bank to actually start funding the company itself in terms of startup costs. She laid a very deep line in the sand saying, you cannot go cold. You got to have a part-time income if you want to leave. And that was, a little bit of a dampener on the whole entrepreneurial journey, but I wouldn't have made it if I didn't have that. A lot of I would say a good share of my income, I would probably say a third, comes from writing for various different publications and people. And that's what carried us for a while. There were some other positions that I picked up that were, some were longer than others, but without that part-time income while trying to grow a practice, I'd have failed in the first 6 to 12 months.
So to take a step back, when you were still at, I guess, that second firm, and actually how you and I met was the launch of NAPFA Genesis, which is the group inside of NAPFA for folks that are advisors that are 33 and under. So really designed to take care of sort of your first 10 years in the industry, which is how you and I met, because I got asked to be on the board by one of the other board members, and the rest is history. But the reason I bring that up is, one, I think Genesis is a great organization. And if you're under 33, go join, especially if you're in NAPFA. If you're a student, it's like $30. So go get involved. The second piece to that is, the opportunities, my understanding is those opportunities through Genesis is what led to a lot of your side hustles and sort of these writing gigs. So can you talk about sort of the giving back in terms of being involved in NAPFA, and then sort of some of the direct benefits you got out of that through some of these various writing opportunities when you launched your firm?
Yeah. So Genesis, everything I have built in terms of Genesis moving forward into my career in terms of giving back is something I wish I'd have had 3 years ago in my career. And that's serendipitously, that's how everything has been built in my career. So it was a case of FPA NextGen was around, but sometimes the conversations would go on a tangent that fee-only people just got left out on because it was talking about, commissions and trails and broker-dealers. And I was like, well, I'm not going to read that. It doesn't apply to me. So then I started thinking, well, how can we make a group that is purely fee-only, even though NextGen is probably, 75% fee-only at this point. How can we make a group that's purely fee-only? But the other problem I found with NextGen is the age range was quite large. Like if you were coming in straight from college, you could be jumping into a conversation with someone who's 36. What's it cut off? 34? I don't even remember at this point.
37, I think.
37?
Even. So it's a bigger gap.
So if you're 22 and you're seeing someone who's 36 having a conversation, there is a good chance you're actually not even involved in that same realm of financial planning as that person is. So there's a lot of disconnect there. So that's why Genesis was a case of, let's make this focused on students and new career starters in financial planning. They have to be under the age of 33 because we need to make it a short time span of, whether you're a student looking to get into the profession, you probably want to talk to a 24-year-old who's been in it for a couple of years just to find out what it's about. Or if you are an associate and looking to move to a lead planner, you want to find someone who has just gone through that transition so it's fresh in their mind, and they may be, 28, 29. So that was, I needed to talk to all those people throughout my career and had to find them, like one by one. And I really wanted a group of fee-only people all in one place that was a brain trust for all of this. And so that, I approached NAPFR and said, you don't have a group like NextGen. Like, why not? And they said, we've tried. It just has never stuck. So I said, can I try it? And they said, sure. Like, we'll give you some marketing help. We'll give you a list of all our members under the age that you specify and try and build it. So I pretty much called up 5 people and I said, do you want to be part of forming this group? And they were like, heck yeah, I do, because I don't know anyone. Like, there's all these fee-only people around the country, and I think I'm on an island. I don't know anyone. So everyone jumped at it, and it just grew from there. So you came along. You were the catalyst for a lot of the ideas. You get a lot of props from me for growing that group. And I think, as that group evolved, we started putting in term limits. I dropped off after a couple of years, getting a little burned out, and someone else came in. New ideas, new energy. That was what was needed.
Yeah, and I think the group is running very strong. It's in great hands right now. Every time I go to a Genesis event, it's bigger and better than where we left it. But and so sort of the second part to that question is, I remember when you launched your firm, you had made some media connections through having worked with Genesis. Like, how did some of those writing gigs, evolve out of that?
They pretty much came out of being pretty ballsy. I think I was at a conference once and I happened to be walking down the hall with a guy I didn't even know. And he introduced himself as the editing director of Financial Planning magazine. And I said, I really enjoy your magazine, but it's so full of old writers. Like, where are the young people writing about stuff that I want to read about? I don't care about like disqualified distributions from an IRA. I want to care about how do I go from an associate to a lead planner? And he's like, yeah, we don't have anyone. So I said, can I write some content for you? And if it's good, you publish it. And he said, of course you can. So I sent him a piece. It got published. And then I kind of threw everything to the wall and see if it stuck. And I said, great, but I'm kind of busy. Could you pay me to write the next one? And I got the look of, don't push it, son. But eventually that did become a paying gig. It probably wasn't too long after I had that conversation because I kept pushing it. And I said, people need to read this, and I want to make some side income here. And as soon as people started seeing my name in a byline, I then reached out to some technology providers and said, I'm writing content out here. I use your software, and I know a lot of other younger advisors who don't know your software. How are you pulling them into finding out about your software? And they're like, oh, we don't know. Like, we're tech providers. We're not really marketers. So I said, well, let's go down this content kind of pathway here. Let's write some content. Let's push it out on various platforms. It's written by a younger advisor. It's going to attract younger advisors. Let's see where it goes. And again, that was, a couple months for free. Then I said, look at the traffic you're getting. Now you got to pay me. And it is essentially snowballed from there. So, people like Wealthbox. I did an internal library for Wealthbox. I did about a year of content for Blue Leaf. Do writing for a couple of companies, but I'm under NDAs for those just because they use it as their proprietary marketing. And it just, a lot of it is word of mouth and me just asking people. If you go to a company's website and their blog is lacking and you say to them, I know what content will attract people to your website, let me write it for X amount of dollars per piece. They'll either say yes or no. If they say yes, great, you're done, you go. If they say yes, but we can't pay you that much, you say, okay, I'll do it for less for a certain period of time. If it's good, you then match the rate I just told you. And inevitably it works.
So for the folks out there that are thinking writing as a side hustle, and I will say writing is a skill set I do not possess. I'm very envious of the folks that do possess it because it is a great way to be able to leverage your knowledge and be able to get your foot in the door in a lot of different situations. But for a new advisor that's launching a firm, what do you recommend they sort of come in at a price point? Like post free, they've proven themselves. Do they ask for $1 a word, or is it flat rate or retainer? And like, how does that sort of go up over time as they get more experience and more proven in the writing?
Yeah, so my pricing actually differs per project. So for some people, if I have a set timeline with them on their editorial calendar, I will charge per piece because typically the pieces are very much the same length. So I actually based it on what my hourly rate was in terms of an advisor, because I'm giving all of my knowledge I have as an advisor, putting it on paper, and it's taking me the same amount of time as it would with working with a client. There's some pieces that if I'm writing on a set schedule, it's the same amount as I would charge a client. So typically a piece takes me 3 to 4 hours. So some of my contracts are $750 a piece.
That's a good way of basing it, is just on your hourly rate that you would charge a client.
Yeah. And there's some people I charge per word. On my per word rate, I've actually asked other financial writers, what do you charge? And again, depending on the budget that you're working with, you've always got to be cognizant of not shooting yourself in the foot. My typical per word rate is anywhere between 50 cents to $1. Okay.
And a typical just baseline article, maybe 500 to 750 words. If you're Kitsis, they're 4,000. Kitsis does not pay $1 per word. He does not pay. I'm sorry, everybody. It'd be a great way to make a lot of money. If only he got paid $1 a word. He'd be retired by now. So, okay. So, I think that's a side hustle that a lot of folks are interested in. I know, you have to be a really good writer, or you at least have to be a good writer. You have to be able to communicate through writing if you're going to get those gigs. But you're right that we've gone out and looked for writers for our advisor blog and sort of previous work that I've done and looking for writers, and they're hard to come by. Good, reliable writers. And I know all the tech companies are struggling with the same thing because they're looking for consumer-facing content. They're looking for advisor-facing content. It will be different if it's branded versus not. So if you're writing, let's say, consumer-facing content for, I don't know, Betterment Institutional because they asked you to write, or Betterment, if you're writing consumer-facing and it mentions you and your company, well, that's marketing. Maybe you charge less. If it's you're writing it and they put their name on it, you can charge more because you get no extra benefits. So there's a lot of levers to pull in this whole pricing thing, but it's good to hear sort of some generic, or I guess sort of general framing for the pricing.
Yeah, and I would say you have to have experience and you have to be good, like you just mentioned. And there was a lot of times I did writing for free or on a reduced rate until that company saw what I was capable of doing. So it's, you may not get to $1 a word in your first year. You may be doing it 25 to 50 cents a word, or you may be doing it at $100 a post if you're doing 500 to 750 in words. But over time, that racks up. And, over time, once you start talking to people and other people talk about you, then you start to get more people. And then once you get more demand, you raise your rates. It's, typical supply and demand.
That's a great point. And I know some financial writers, they get paid bank. I mean, it can be a lucrative career if that's your thing. But all right, so back to, you decided to launch Finance for Teachers. Talk to us a little bit about just sort of the process, and if you can even remember, what was sort of the dollar outlay that it took. And I will caveat this by saying this was prior to XY Planning Network because we were sort of watching our firms around the same time. So you were doing this on your own. You went solo with it. Sort of what I don't know, can you just talk us through a little bit of that early process and sort of formulating your niche and the naming and pricing and just sort of how all that came to be?
Yes. I was fortunate in the fact that the company I use for my branding and my website actually gifted me their whole package. And the reason they did that is because I was actually talking about them to a lot of other advisors because I was using them in my company. So if there's anything that you can gather from that, it's pretty much karma. If you start talking good things about someone that you know does good work and you need to use them in the future, then it may come back and you may get some great benefit from it. So I probably saved about $8,000 on branding and websites just through that relationship alone, because they did a custom build on top of WordPress, not using any templates. And then they built in a payment processor too, which, before XYPN and any relationships, that was kind of a little unheard of in the advisor world, just having a dedicated payment processor. But I think, total outlay cost was probably around 10 to 12 grand. And a lot of that was, setting up S Corp, getting compliance done, getting all the documents there. And a lot of it was talking to other advisors. If you're setting up your firm for the first time and you're doing it without, like you said, XY planning network, you're essentially doing it blind. And you don't know what you need to do because you can't ask your boss, else you're going to be starting that firm as an unemployed person the next day. So you kind of have to do it on the DL with other solo owners out there and say, what did you do here? What provider did you use here? And, software is easy to find, but if you're trying to find someone to help you with compliance, sometimes that's a little tricky and you got to ask around and be, kind of whispering in the dark about that and trying to get some good names.
Yeah, and it just goes back to the value of the study group, right? And having friends that are and peers, I guess, that are in that similar situation to be able to shoot an email to say, hey, any recommendations on compliance with folks that aren't going to tell your boss. And I would say if they're your coworkers, your current firm, probably forego that email if you can, but everyone else.
I mean, I made the mistake of actually telling a coworker I was leaving. He didn't mention it to my boss, but I actually told him 9 months before I actually left. And so every lunch we had, he's like, so are you leaving yet? I'm like, I still have this to do and this to do. If you can handle it, don't tell anyone other than your spouse that you're leaving. And it's very hard to do because you're always excited about this next new thing you're doing. But try and keep it under wraps because you never know who knows who and who's going to mention it accidentally in conversation.
Sure. No, that's a great point. So you went with the finance for teachers route, which was really one of the early truly niched firms to the point that you named your firm your niche, right? There certainly have been niches out there and folks that have done different things, but you went all in with finance for teachers by literally naming the company with the word teachers in it. So I guess how was that process in terms of going out and finding teachers that wanted to be the client of a financial advisor?
Yeah. So actually it was marketing to teachers while I was at the previous firm. And it was a case of writing articles, going to local pension meetings, tapping up my own network, and talking to people about services and what kind of branding that they kind of responded to, but also pricing points of advisors and what services they wanted. So there's a lot of research there, and quickly realized that teachers were very uneducated as to personal finances. They're very cheap, so that they may not be responding to the pricing that is very traditional. They're also very pension heavy, so they're not responding to an AUM model. They're more likely going to respond to an hourly or retainer model. And I do have the fortunate position that teachers in Illinois are very well paid. So it's not unheard of if you have a high school teacher who is coaching on the side. One of my current clients is 33. She's earning over 100 grand because she teaches and she coaches.
Wow, that is, I was thinking you were going to say 60.
No.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a well-paid profession here. It gets the state in trouble with pensions because then the pensions are higher. So we'll see if it's a long-standing thing. But I digress. Anyway, just from being around teachers a lot and hearing all their conversations in family conversations, I realized there's so much need there. And even when trying to look for a fee-only advisor in Chicago that works with teachers exclusively, there wasn't one. But even one who held themselves out and was very SEO heavy on working with teachers was really hard to find. So I was like, well, maybe this is a hole in the market. And if there's a lot of highly paid teachers who are going to pay, out of their cash flow for financial planning, then maybe that's the way to go. And if it doesn't work, you just change to something else. And if it really doesn't work, you just go find a job again. So it was a case of, let's put it all in one basket, see if it works. My big goal was to have a finance for teachers in every state. That was my, 10 times hairy goal. But, that never worked. And could it work? Possibly. But, teachers are paid differently in different states. So it's a case of a business model that's maybe picking on the wrong demographic.
Yeah. So obviously over the course of time, you've ultimately made a rebranding decision. So I guess how did you, maybe sort of that first year or two, what was it like, I guess, in terms of bringing on clients? I mean, did you see sort of that, we talk about a client and a half to 2 clients a month. Was that pretty standard for you? Was it more or less? Sort of what was your, I guess, client acquisition path?
I thought I was a failed entrepreneur in my first 18 months. It was a case of when I heard that 1 to 2 clients a month, I didn't hit anywhere close. I finished my first year with 6 clients, and I pulled teeth to get those. Like, it was tapping on my personal networks. It was doing presentations at schools. It was going against Sarah's wishes and actually making relationships with her administration. And she was like, please don't mess around where I work. And I was like, yeah, screw you, I'm going in. Which is not the best thing to do to your wife. But, it was really hard to even try and get those first few clients in the door, even though I was marketing specifically to them, knew their benefits inside and out, was married to a teacher, so I was in their world anyway. Yeah, to come up with 12 clients at the end of the first year, I was a long way off from that. I ended the first year at 6.
What do you think the reason was? Because, it sounds to me like it's everything that we promote, right? So, and of course, we're always right. So therefore, this should have worked. No, you're the expert. You had access to the teachers. You were in front of them. You knew their situation. Like, there was no question that this was a good fit for them. So what do you think the issue was? Was it they just didn't see the value? Was it pricing model was off? Like, what do you attribute having had 6 clients, or was it just it's just hard to get going and therefore there were 6 clients?
I would say it's down to a couple of things. One, I think it's very hard to get going as a business owner anyway. Just trying to get the first couple clients in the door. It's like that snowball avalanche effect. It's going to be really hard to roll that snowball up, but push it down the hill and it grows pretty fast. So I think that I'm also, because I'm a good writer, that leads to the fact I'm also an introvert. I find it very difficult to have conversations with people I don't know, let alone try and provide them information on a service that I'm going to try to sell them. I still have issues with that. I would rather write to someone and give them all the benefits of a service rather than talk to them face to face. So even doing presentations in schools, that was tough. I would excel at the information presentation, but when it came time to actually talking to people about, do you need this help? I provide this service. I would fail again and again at that conversation, getting their contact details, following up. And it got to a point I'm like, well, why am I doing this if I can't convert any sales from it? Like, this doesn't make any sense. And then I was realizing I'm dealing with a population that has been told their financial problems are due to the state taking money out of your pension. That has been drilled into Illinois teachers again and again and again. And it's true, their pension is the worst in the country, but they're well paid. Their spouses work in the private sector. No way is the state responsible for any financial implications of their spouse, so why should they not be getting financial planning? So there was a disconnect there with teachers understanding if they needed planning or not. So there was a lot of education I was doing there. So I think all of those things together was why it was a little slow in the first year.
Okay. So then how did that sort of flow into year 2? And remind me of the timeline. So you launched in 2014 or 2013?
2013. So June 2013.
Okay. So so at the end of your 12 months, June 2014, you have 6 clients, I guess. So what was the next 12 and then 24 months into 2015 and 2016 like for you?
So I'd say it was ticking along probably a client every couple months. And I was taking hourly work as well. So I was probably doing, 1 retainer client every couple months and then 1 or 2 hourly clients every quarter. So those would keep on ticking me and give me a nice boost of income when I was kind of feeling down about not getting in retainer clients. So it was a case of that just kept ticking on. And by the end of let's say the end of 2015, so 18 months in.
Yeah, that would have been 18 months into 15.
I finished out at 12 clients on retainer, which I thought, that's okay, just given the slow trajectory I had, 18 months in and out 12 clients. And, I was still writing on the side. I still had other job opportunities I was working on with other financial providers. It was slow, but I still had a consistent salary coming in. It was small, but it was still a consistent amount I could pay myself out of the company every month.
Were you having fun at that point?
It was hard. I mean, I love financial planning. It's what I will do till the day I die. But when you become a financial planner and business owner, it's a different ballgame. Like, you're running a business, you're projecting out what the next X amount of months are going to look like, even though you don't know what tomorrow is going to look like. And then you're planning for clients, you're trying to maintain relationships. There's a lot going on. And so it was a case of, a little bit of shell shock going through that first, 12 months of being a business owner and trying to do the day job I just left. I would say it's fun. It's very emotionally involved because you feel every single up and down of your company and your clients' lives at the same time. So I was not well prepared for that. I wear my heart on my sleeve. I'm an emotional guy. So that first 12 months and even the 18 months, it was just a challenge, just going through the entrepreneurial journey and feeling everything and not being insulated to anything.
Yeah. And, this is probably my most frequent quote, and it comes from Jude Boudreau down in New Orleans. And he told me one time, he said, or maybe he put it on Twitter, he said, entrepreneurship, the highest highs and the lowest lows, sometimes all in the same day. And I don't think that can be overstated. It is amazing the highs and lows that we can experience when you find, a client emails you and says, hey, I'm ready to move on. Like, could you close down my account? And then they won't pick up the phone when you call them. And then later that day, you finally sign a prospect who came back to you 6 months later and hasn't responded to emails for 6 months. And you're just like, what just happened? And like at the end of the day, you're almost shell shocked because you had just so much emotion hit you all at once. And, you're right that entrepreneurship is an emotional journey because of the stress and the risk. And we're just not taught. And I don't know how to teach people how to be ready for it. But, there are things you can do. And obviously it's part of the equation we try to solve in terms of surrounding yourself with people and getting yourself into study groups and helping eliminate some of the decisions that you have to make around various things like compliance and technology. But ultimately, like, you still own a business. It's still a tough road, no matter whether you do it solo, you do it with a group, or I don't care if you go get I'm losing their name, like an Ameriprise, office, it's still going to be a tough road just because it's just the reality of entrepreneurship, for lack of a better way of saying it.
Yeah. When you find yourself at your desk at noon and you're crying, you realize this wasn't what my job was like before I worked for someone else. I never cried. That's when I realized, okay, this is going to be a lot harder than I thought. And I kind of had to realize, again, my emotions are very near the surface of my personality. So it's going to come out, and it's going to be a case where I'm disappointed, very excited, frankly, crying. I'm not ashamed to admit that. I've cried various times during running my own company. And you have to be able to handle it. If not, you got to close and go find a job.
So last summer in 2016, you penned an article for Financial Planning, the magazine, which you have the monthly column there, and you talked about, having sort of hit this low point in your life, or not in your life, I'm sorry, with the business. Obviously, it's hard to separate those two. But can you talk about, one, we will link to that article in the show notes so folks can go read it. But can you talk just a bit about sort of that time period and what was going on that caused you to sort of open up like that and publish that article?
Going into 2016, I had some writing clients. I had 12 ongoing financial planning clients. By the time I hit May, my client roster was down to 5 clients. For one reason or another, people thought they were done with planning, so they ended their retainer agreement. They thought they were comfortable. There was writing contracts that ended naturally. There was some where they didn't realize they needed any more writing, so they finished. I was due to run out of money in September, and it kind of all came crashing down in the period of about 3 weeks. So I was actually I just sat around and thinking, this is a really dark place. And it wasn't a normal dark place. The ones that I'm like, yeah, this is a crappy afternoon, but I'm going to go to the bar and it's going to be fine tomorrow morning. This was a prolonged dark place that spanned several weeks. And I realized that even if I got those clients back, even if I got a multitude of writing gigs and my income was fine, my mental disposition will not change because of that. This is something that has been triggered by the emotions of running a business that is deeper than anything my business is able to bring back. And that's when I realized, okay, maybe I'm dealing with some depressive incidences here, or just a depressive episode. And it was a case of just understanding that and knowing that this isn't situational. This is actually something that is going on inside my body and inside my mind. And the best therapy I have is writing. And I've always been charged at Financial Planning Magazine to write with as much honesty as I can bear. And so I emailed my editor and I said, I'm going through this period right now, and I want to write about this as a column because I can't see any content out there that's covering it. Are you okay if it gets this raw? And she's like, the raw you are comfortable with, we'll run it. And so I wrote about it. And I said, this is what I'm going through. These are the situations that I've come across. And even if these situations changed, my mindset, my emotions, and my mental state aren't going to be changed by that, because this goes deeper than the business. Writing about that was therapy, but even when it was published, the amount of feedback I got from advisors saying, I've been dealing with depression for decades. I haven't heard anybody say the words you've said and speak to me as purely as you have. And I actually had to shut down my practice for 2 days just to respond to the phone calls and emails of people saying, A, thank you for being brave enough to write this. And B, you have put into words exactly what I felt for X amount of time. So thank you, and know you're not alone.
And they felt alone for a really long time because it's hard to reach out on these types of things. And I will say that now I am no psychologist. I have no official training in this area, but having struggled with ADHD and having a brother that's bipolar, I have at least been around the world of psychology and just mental health in general. And I'll say that entrepreneurs may be more predisposed to struggling with mental illness or mental health issues, just because I think what makes us a great entrepreneur can also be something that we have to struggle with. And so for the folks that are out there that are listening to this, please do not be afraid to get help. Don't be afraid to go talk to someone. As personally, I've been in and out of therapy most of my adult life, just because it's one of those things that you realize just how beneficial it is to talk with someone whenever you're hitting these points. And Dave, for you, it's obviously therapeutic to be able to actually write about it and be able to open up about it. But that's a huge step that I think a lot of advisors aren't willing to take it and maybe don't have the medium to do so, and they just suffer. So for anybody out there, if you are suffering, please get help. Please find someone to talk to, whether it's actually a therapist or a family member or a friend, or you can call me if you want. You can call Dave. I'm sure, find someone to talk to, if nothing else, out of this episode. But what sort of transpired after that? So you had the opportunity, you wrote, you realized you weren't alone. Sort of, I guess, what was next then?
I mean, the situation didn't change as a result of writing it. It was still there. I was still 3 months away from running out of cash. And, I showed Sarah the article. I hadn't talked to her about it. And she looked at it and she's like, I had no idea you were going through this. Like, how have you been able to hide this? I'm like, I work downstairs in the basement. When I walk up those stairs, I have to put on a brave face here because I can't pull you down into my business because we have, a family to do. You have a job to run. We got all this stuff to do. And I thought I could solve all these problems by myself. So once she had read that, she was like, well, you've done this niche-focused branding for 3 years. Have you thought about going back to just doing generalist stuff? And she'd actually suggested maybe do that from the start. But I thought, I got to try this niche marketing all in first. And so it was a case, well, I don't have anything else to lose. And there was a couple of things I wanted to change in my practice. So I said, well, let me go through this process of rebranding, changing some of the software and processes in my practice, And if it doesn't work by, the end of the year, then I'll just shut down. I gave myself a 6-month window. It also forced me to sit down and think about, what do I actually want my business to be? Because I don't have a long amount of time for actually to run. So if I actually want it to last for the long term, is there actually something that's a little broken here that is causing it not to be successful the way I need it to be? So a couple things there. One, I followed the work of Gary Vaynerchuk for the last 18 months. He's very rah-rah with his entrepreneurial speech, but he has a lot of good things to say if you tune out a lot of his loud brashness. And a lot of it is about self-awareness. And so I had to sit down and realize, okay, who am I as a person? Am I meant to run a business? Am I meant to be client-facing? Do I need to go into a back office? I explored all these things and realized that I have to have freedom in a job, else it stifles me and I can't do my job effectively. So in that respect, I do need to run a business because I need to call the shots. But I realized my income goals were too high. When I actually sat down and realized, what do we need as a family? I had been projecting too high and putting a lot of pressure on myself. So those got moved down. I then realized that I don't need a lot of income to come from my business, A, for us to survive, but B, for us also to achieve everything that we want to. So I don't need it to be this grandiose thing, and I don't want it to be. So build it to a level where I need it to be, and that's the goal. Well, as soon as I rebranded and got, I'm still getting through that clearer space of mind. But as I'm going through that, things started to change. And I will credit it to one thing. I read a book called The Miracle Morning, and that book and the process it talks about pretty much changed my life. So it's a book by Hal Elrod, and it essentially lays out a morning routine that you complete before you go to work, and it sets you up for the day. So it involves meditation, daily devotions, reading, working out, and journaling. Going through that process actually lifted me out of that depression. It helped me work through it and understand why it was here in the first place. Just by being in a fresher mental state of mind and being in a better physical place as well, it actually started to transform my business too. So as I rebranded, my CPA came to me and said, thank you for rebranding. I've got a small RIA that I run, has about $1 million in assets. Can you run that for me? And I've got a book of 350 people that I do taxes for. They need planning and investment work. Can we work together? And I'm like, as long as you don't own my company and we just do this, marketing-wise in terms of a partnership, I'm all in. I don't have anything else to lose. I have to find a job in 6 months. And then I reached out to people that I thought might need writing help. One of those was a startup company, and that has the potential to be a very lucrative contract in the fact I could earn, with that writing contract, what I earned last year in everything that I did. So it's 2017 is the year.
So there's just so many nuggets in this. I suspect this is a story people will go back and listen to multiple times to sort of pull some of these various pieces out. But one that you did mention is the ability to sort of get out of your own way and not put so much pressure on yourself for how much money you need to make. And it's something that we recommend advisors do, and I'm not sure very many do, is when you're starting a business to really understand how much money do you need to make to be happy as a family or as an individual. What do you actually need? And I think we get really anchored on, well, I need to make as much money as I did in my last job. Okay, well, do you really? Are you able to cut back your lifestyle in a way that doesn't actually affect your happiness and you don't need to make as much money? What are your actual financial goals? Maybe go meet with an actual financial planner and work with your spouse to figure out, what is it that we're trying to do? What are we building towards? And what do I need the business to provide? Because the difference between I've got to build a business that produces $200,000 a year of net income versus I need a business that gives me a $60,000 a year salary and I'll be happy, the decisions that you make will be very, very different, especially early on in terms of how you're going to build the business and what clients you're going to work with and what's your service model and all of that. So I think that it's huge in just the if nothing else, the psychological effect that has had, but also the probably the real impact it's had on your business to actually just say, I don't need as much money as I used to think I did. And if I don't need that much, look what I can build without having to stress about that as much.
I'd agree. And I'll plug my own writing here. I've written a lot of this in the March column, 2017 of Financial Planning Magazine, all about self-awareness and the journey I've gone through in the last 6 months. So, if people have missed it or want more information, it's right there, all in words. But I think, I had penned I need 100 grand because that's a cool number. I had to go back and literally say, well, why is that cool? Why have I pinned $100,000 as my income? Do we need that personally? Right now, I'm not anywhere near 100 grand. But what do I need to be near? And there's actually 2 milestones. What do you need to actually be living on without, spiraling downwards and racking up credit card debt? That's your first milestone. Our second milestone is, what do we need to achieve every single goal that we want to achieve? The difference between those two wasn't actually that large. So the pressure it went away at that point. I'm like, okay, so if I can get, and I'm not afraid of sharing my numbers here, I pull about 35 grand gross out of my business each year to go on top of my wife's income. Looking at our numbers and saying, okay, what do we need to save for retirement? What do we need for our kids' college? What do we need for other goals that we have that are shorter term? Instead of 35 grand, I need 75 grand. Getting $40,000 of revenue, now I've added AUM into my practice, is not hard. And I don't need to do it in 6 months. That 75 grand is my goal for a career. Granted, I want it to be way higher than that, but I don't need it to be higher than that. And so if that's, if I'm looking for $40,000 a year and I can get it in 10 years, please, I can't achieve that. I don't deserve to run my own business.
Yeah, and just like I said, you will get there. For anybody that's out there that says, I need to make 100 grand in a year or 2 years, I need to be, at 100 grand. The answer's no, please don't. Please don't start your business until we reset those expectations, because everyone's journey is different, and it is interesting that, and I think personality plays a big part, that we've had folks on the show like Chris GP came on and, he got 27 clients in his first year, which boggles my mind that someone can hit the ground that hard. And it doesn't make him better as a business owner. I think he's just a really good sales guy, and not in a creepy way. He's just good. He's genuine and all of that. And that's his skill set. And where your skill set is you're probably a significantly better writer than he is. So you can leverage that. I think sometimes we try to pigeonhole ourselves into, we got to do it this certain way. And that certain way is not right for everybody. And it's probably not right for most people. It's just how someone did it. And so it's awesome to hear sort of the range of experiences, but that, if you had said, I need to make $100,000 in 24 months or I'm done, you'd have been done. But instead, by sort of resetting those expectations to say, hey, there's a way that I can keep running my own business. I don't have to go get a job. You and I both know that we would pay a lot of money to avoid having jobs. And that's what we're doing, right? Like right now, we're basically paying money every month to not have a boss, which is great. Because we could go make more money on a salary somewhere. But, that there is a way to make it work. And I commend you for being able to sort of reset and refocus. And I think that's extremely hard, but I'm excited to see what 2017 ends up being for you. And, quite possibly the year that everything sort of started taking off for. So I'm excited.
Me too. I mean, I'm excited to see where it goes professionally, but I never want to lose focus of why I did this personally. I get to do the school run every morning and afternoon. I can't put a dollar value on what impact that is having in my kids' lives. And nor would I want to, because I get to, Sarah goes to school early to do work, so I get to be with them and have breakfast and drive them to school and goof around with them and do homework in the afternoon. I could choose to have a nanny do that, but that's what I want to do as a dad. So is that capping out my income? Sure, I'm losing 2 hours of work a day. So, I would say to everybody who's either starting a business in this field or is, going through the initial throes of it, never compare yourself to somebody else. That got me in so much trouble emotionally doing that. And even seeing the whole, 1 to 2 clients a month metric, that I want to smack a wall at that point. I'm like, what am I doing that I don't have that? And what am I doing wrong? Nothing. You're a completely different person than that person who got that. You're running a different business in a different part of the country. You've had completely different life experiences. You cannot compare yourself to another advisor in your same situation. You just cannot.
Yeah, it's so true. And it's great to have peers to be able to bounce ideas off of and see that, and have a bunch of peers so you can see how different they are from each other as well, because they're not all going to be the same. So, well, Dave, thank you again for coming on and sort of and opening up and sharing your experience. Like I said, I'm looking forward to 2017, but I'm for you. But I know a lot of listeners have been asking to hear the raw story, which is what this is, to know that, entrepreneurship, it's not all rainbows and unicorns. There are a lot of highs. There's also a lot of lows. And sometimes those lows feel like they're going to take over and drag out. But there is a way out and there's a way forward, even if that means quote unquote failure, which is going and getting a job making more money than you make today. Kind of sweet that that's failure. It doesn't mean we're living under a bridge. And please, whatever you do, don't put yourself in a financial position that if your business doesn't work, you're living under a bridge. Put yourself in a position that you just have to go get a job. So
yeah, I think one thing I'll leave you with, if you'll let me. This whole entrepreneurial thing is a journey. There is no end point. So you have to love the journey because you're never ending at a destination. And if you can't love the journey, then you have to go get a job and get off the train.
Oh, it's such a good point. Well, Dave, thank you so much for taking the time to be on, man. We really appreciate it. This month's podcasts are brought to you by one of our favorite sponsors and reigning swag champion of the 2016 XYPN conference, Robust Wealth. Robust Wealth is the unique, robo-enhanced, complete wealth management platform that provides advisors with all the tools they need to run, grow, and succeed, including a complete technology stack and portfolio management and rebalancing as a sub-advisor. Utilize Robust Wealth and their partners' institutional investment models or customize your own. Sign up for demo mode and test out their free technology stack at www.robustwealth.com. Robust Wealth, the complete wealth management platform. Climb on. Be sure to join our VIP community at xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to hang out with other XYPN radio listeners, ask questions for future mailbag episodes with myself and Kitsis, and to finally find a community of like-minded financial advisors. Thanks so much for joining me today. We'll see you next time.
You're not alone, and you're not crazy. It's scary starting, building, and growing your own financial planning firm. And that's why we put together a free private community just for you, the Cutting Edge Financial Planner. Go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP or text XYPN Radio to 33344 and join a network of thousands ready to change the lives of Gen X and Gen Y clients.